3 p.m. here in Cairo. Time for our news bulletin. I'm Mahisi Rabian. We'll start with a look at the headlines. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi meets Kenyan President on enhancing bilateral ties and regional developments. Foreign Minister Badr Abdel-Ati speaks over phone with U.S. Secretary of State on Gaza ceasefire. And Russia says delegation to Syria gave support for country's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Welcome back. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received today Kenyan President William Ruto at الاتحادية Presidential Palace. Presidential spokesman Mohammed al-Shinawi said that the two presidents met on enhancing bilateral ties and consultations on regional developments. They also reviewed the wide range of issues of mutual concern. The two leaders further signed a number of cooperation agreements and memoranda of understanding in many fields. They hold a press conference on the outcome of their talks, while a red carpet reception has earlier been held for the Kenyan guest upon his arrival, as the national anthems of both countries were played and two leaders reviewed the guards of honor. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Migration and Expatriate Affairs Badr Abdel-Ati totally called today on parties to the Gaza ceasefire agreement to commit to the implementation of the three phases. The minister made these remarks in a phone call with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, where he stressed the importance of protecting the Palestinian people's rights in their land and reiterated rejection of their deportation. He asserted the necessity of the sustainable access of humanitarian aid to the war-torn strip. Egypt's top diplomat also urged the significance of laying a political framework for ending the Palestinian-Israeli conflict based on the two-state solution in line with the international laws. To the same end, Minister of Foreign Migration and Egyptian Expatriates Affairs Badr Abdel-Ati today met a delegation of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Abdel-Ati affirmed Egypt's support for the Palestinian rights in retaining their land and pressed for a fair and everlasting solution to the Palestinian cause along the two-state solution with its capital as Al-Quds al-Sharif. The foreign minister also reviewed Egypt's efforts for ensuring the implementation of the phased-in ceasefire agreement in Gaza in its set timeline and its continued contact with regional and international partners to hold the deal and commit to the provisions. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians today continue streaming into Gaza's most heavily destroyed northern area after the Israeli occupation military opened the north for the first time since the early weeks of the genocide war, a dramatic reversal of their exodus 15 months ago. In a humanitarian update, the United Nations humanitarian body has said that more than 376,000 Palestinians are estimated to have returned to their places of origin in northern Gaza. The move followed the withdrawal of Israeli occupation forces from the two main roads along a main corridor that leads into the north early on Monday, in line with a ceasefire agreement to end the genocide war in the Palestinian enclave. Over 47,000 Palestinians, over half of them women and children, have been killed in 15 months of genocide war in Gaza, with around 90% of it have been internally displaced many times due to the continued aggression. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has demanded that Israeli Occupation Authority retract its order for the UN's Palestinian Relief Agency UNRWA to leave Al-Quds. Guterres said he regretted the decision, stressing the agency's irreplaceable nature, and rejected the Israeli occupation claims of sovereignty over occupied Al-Quds, where UNRWA maintains an office. Also, Philippe Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, said the implementation declaration of ban on the UN Palestine Relief Agency due to come into effect on Thursday will be disastrous and cripple the UNRWA work in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. The Israeli occupation troops killed 16 Palestinians and injured scores others in the city of Jenin, underscoring the occupation renewed aggression in the occupied West Bank since the start of the ceasefire in Gaza. In Jenin, further north, a major operation with hundreds of Israeli occupation troops backed by armored vehicles, drones and helicopters looked set to go into a second week with smoke rising above the refugee camp adjacent to the city. Armored bulldozers and diggers have destroyed buildings and roads in the camp, a crowded township built for the Palestinians who fled their homes, fearing the occupation troops' attacks. The Russian Foreign Ministry said today that a high-level delegation in Syria expressed support for the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity following the fall of Bashar al-Assad. The Russian side said the visit came at a crunch point in the Russian-Syrian relations, while the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov called it an important trip. The Kremlin spokesman said that it is necessary to build and maintain a permanent dialogue with the Syrian authorities. The delegation was led by Russian Deputy Foreign Minister, who is also Putin's special envoy on the Middle East and Africa, and met with Syria's new leader, Ahmad al-Shara. Meanwhile, the UN's High Commissioner for Refugees has urged the international community to back Syria's reconstruction efforts to facilitate the return of millions of refugees. UNHCR Chief Filippo Grandi was addressing a press conference in Ankara after returning from a trip in Lebanon and Syria. The UNHCR chief said about 800,000 Syrian refugees have managed to regain their country, and another 600,000 who had been internally displaced have gone back to their homes. He also expected that more refugees would make the trip during the holidays or school vacations. And continuing our news bulletin and to the international front, where Russian officials said that a Ukrainian drone attack killed 2 people in the Russian border region this morning as Kyiv launched a major overnight barrage that set an oil refinery ablaze and targeted the nuclear facility. Separately, Russia's defense ministry said it had downed 104 Ukrainian drones over western regions, including Kursk and Bryansk. Moscow and Kyiv have exchanged almost daily drone or missile attacks over the nearly 3-year war, targeting energy and military sites in both countries. Strikes have escalated after Donald Trump won last year's U.S. presidential election, with the Republicans seeking a swift end to the fighting. Russian President Vladimir Putin said that his country would hold peace talks with Ukraine, but ruled out speaking directly with President Vladimir Zelensky, whom he called illegitimate. The Ukrainian leader responded by saying that Putin was afraid of negotiations and was using tricks to prolong the nearly 3-year conflict. Zelensky said that there was a chance to achieve a real peace, but that the Kremlin chief was frustrating efforts to stop the fighting. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio welcomed the European Union decision to extend its sanctions against Russia over the war in Ukraine after Hungary agreed to the move. Following weeks of stalling, the United States and the European Union have agreed on a need to maintain maximum pressure on the Russian leader Vladimir Putin to end the war in Ukraine. The agreement came after a first telephone call between EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas and the new U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Their call comes after European leaders voiced alarm since the inauguration of U.S. President Donald Trump over his pledges to seek a quick end to the Ukraine war, fearing he will cut off crucial aid to Kyiv and force a ceasefire that favors Moscow. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un vowed today that Pyongyang's nuclear program would continue indefinitely, days after new U.S. President Donald Trump said he would make renewed diplomatic overtures to North Korean leader Kim, recently visited the nuclear material production facility and warned of an inevitable confrontation, which he called hostile nation, and said 2025 would be a crucial year for bolstering North Korea's nuclear forces. In response, an official with the U.S. National Security Council said Trump would pursue the complete denuclearization of North Korea just as he did in his first term in office. And to our economic news, where Minister of Petroleum Karim Badawi participated in the Africa Energy Summit in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, to review accelerating energy access across Africa. The summit witnessed the participation of the African Union, the African Development Bank, and the World Bank, and is considered an opportunity for governments and the private sectors to advance the ambitious goal of providing electricity access to 300 million people across Africa by 2030. The gathering also reviewed supporting economic growth and improving living standards in the continent. Africa's partners pledged to offer more than $50 billion to support electricity projects in the continent. Egypt's bourse opened higher today amid purchases by the Arab investors against sell-offs by local and foreign investors. The market capital of listed companies reached £2.23 trillion amid overall transaction of £4.7 billion. The benchmark index EGX 30 rose 0.73%, while the equal weighted indices EGX 70 and EGX 100 climbed 1.19% and 1.1% respectively. Oil prices settled up, bouncing back from the multi-week lows after the White House reiterated its tariff plans for the Canadian and Mexican imports. Brent crude oil futures was up 0.2% to $77.35 per barrel after settling up 0.5% overnight, while the U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures edged higher about 0.1% to reach $73.7 per barrel. To the exciting world of sport, where injury hit Egypt exited the 2025 IHF Men's Handball World Championship after conceding a 34-33 loss to France in the quarterfinals. The Frenchmen dominated the first half, which ended in an 18-14 win, while in the second half, the Pharaohs made an impressive comeback and led a tight-fought race, holding a draw more than once with the rivals before the French side managed to hit the winner 3 minutes before the game's end. France will next face host Croatia in the semi-finals at 10 p.m. Cairo local time. Croatia reached the semi-round after defeating Hungary 31-30 in another stunning quarterfinals encounter. The tournament is co-hosted by Croatia, Denmark, and Norway from January 14th till February 2nd. And Liverpool's manager Arne Slot has said that his team can afford to rest a host of regular starters for their last league phase game in the Champions League, and giving players a break is more of a priority than maintaining first place in the standings. Captain Virgil van Dijk, top scorer Mohamed Salah, and keeper Alisson have all been left behind for today's game at the PSV Eindhoven, along with others. Liverpool guaranteed a place in the Champions League last 16, also lead the Premier League, and are still in the FA Cup and League Cup, so will have plenty of big matches to come this season, while Slot's side have won all 7 games in the competition. Liverpool could still be overtaken at the top by Barcelona if they lose at PSV, but the manager was not overly concerned about their final position. Well, with that, our dear viewers, we come to the end of our news bulletin. Many thanks for watching.